Yeah, my last piece of advice, if you're gonna go do this, make sure you have that step in your process of setting aside your ego and being completely open to whatever it is that you receive back, and knowing that it's a gift, right? The critical feedback is a gift to help you, your team, and your company be better. That's it.
Mic drop there. Set aside your ego. No big deal, right, guys? Just
No big deal.
put it aside. No ego.
Smoke some weed. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 146 of High Spirits. I'm Ben Larson,
And I'm Anna Marie Gramstein.
and we're recording Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. We have a cannabis business news roundup for you today, just the two of us. Gonna check in, see what's going on in each other's worlds. My world is vastly different than it normally is, and what's happening in the cannabis world, of course. And Anna Ray, you were up in Sacramento this week at the California State Fair. Was that as exciting as it sounds?
Well, I am a county fair, I guess now state fair fan in general. I
Hmm.
love a good kind of regional meetup to celebrate crafts, animals, farmers, all the things. And for the last handful of years, the California State Fair has had a cannabis activation. And I had never been to it before. So it was time to do that. And so, yeah, I went to Sacramento. It wasn't quite 105 degrees as it often is there. It was in the 90s, so pleasant. And it was the award show day. It was amazing, actually. Really cool. One of the larger retailers in California, Embark, is the event organizer that makes it possible for retail sales to be happening in the area. So,
Hmm.
just like many state fairs, if you've been, there's all these little areas. There's the area where the cows are, and there's the area where the cannabis is. Uh, it was a place that you had to check an ID before you could go into the area, so there weren't any kids in the zone, but it was really big, and they had
Hmm.
exhibits, history exhibit, a science exhibit, lots of brands were set up. You could purchase and consume product. They had the World Cup, that was the 3rd place game while I was there, that was playing in the background, which was pretty fun to get to consume a joint and watch the World Cup with a bunch of people outdoors. I loved it. Yeah.
So, I mean, usually when you're entering a cannabis space, i.e., a dispensary, like it's pretty noticeable. There's a little bit of that kind of stigma of like, do I want to go in here? Like, how did they do? Like you said, they were carting to get in, but like, did it feel like it was a part of the rest of the state fair?
It absolutely did. Great question. And I do have some pictures. Eric, Mr. Producer Man, pull them up. There's a picture of this is a picture of one of the science exhibits, but I've also got a picture of myself right at the entrance, a little selfie that I took. And it didn't feel like there was a big stigma at all about it. It really felt like it was just any other place in the state fair, kind of like the wine area where you also had to check an ID if you wanted to go and hang out in the wine zone. Um, and it was big. I mean, it
Hmm.
was not off in the corner with a dark shadow, down a hallway that nobody saw. It was right off the main entrance of the fair. And it seemed really well attended by people that were attending the fair and checking it out. And the cool thing too is that it was the Golden Bears are the name of the awards that the state fair gives to folks that compete in the competitions, which have been going on for over 50 years.
So not just the cannabis awards, like the awards in. Oh, very cool. Okay.
Yeah, so, like, best cow or, best tapestry or, all of the things that people compete in, best jam, all of these different awards, and so they had a whole bunch of different categories for cannabis, different categories of flower and edibles, and they awarded the Golden Bears there, and I think the president of the State Fair Association came and gave a speech and talked about how proud the fair is to be including cannabis as one of the state's most important agricultural crops. And I'd say that it was really pretty cool for the folks that won those Golden Bears to have that type of recognition, because in particular, one of the farmers that got called up for best flower is from Northern California, from the Mendocino area, and remarked in his speech about how long he'd been doing it for and how just important this type of recognition was. So, I mean, yes, was this like a monumental moment for the industry? I would say probably not, but was it really sweet and a great way to just feel like cannabis is becoming more a part of our culture and accepted? I think it was really a win for that. So I
Well,
really enjoyed it.
yeah, in the videos you showed, I would say it's fairly high production value, so it seems nice to be included with everyone else for once. So, yeah, where we can often be pretty critical of the state, good on you, California.
Totally.
Thanks
And
thanks for the normalization.
absolutely. And the state fair does go until August 2nd. So if people are in California, they can go to Sacramento and go and check out this activation every day that the state fair is open, and the on-site dispensary and consumption area is available. So gets me excited too about what public consumption could be in a social situation. They don't allow alcohol and cannabis to be commingled. So for those that wanted to have a beer and a joint, that isn't allowed, but, one step at a time.
I haven't been to the state fair since I was probably 12 years old. Is there a lot of people that go to the state fair? Is it like, is this a thing?
It's totally a thing. As a parent,
Okay.
you should be taking your kids. We often go to the Sonoma County Fair. I hadn't been to the state fair, but yeah, you've got all the carnival games, and which I think is sometimes it feels like it's gambling for children,
Mm,
because
mhm.
they just take your money and you rarely win. But there is a promise of winning a massive stuffed animal or whatever.
Yeah.
Lots of rides, little roller coasters, Ferris wheels, stuff like that, stuff that you spin around and get real nauseous. Lots of delicious food that is very unhealthy, like funnel cakes and huge turkey legs that you can hold in your hand. Yeah, state fair is super fun, and a great way to support the local community. Lots of small businesses and farmers, and it's kind of like the place where the state shows up to have lots of pride about the people that are from here, and the cultures, and kind of a lot about agriculture
Got
plus
it.
carnival. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, anything sounds exciting these days that are outside of the four walls of my home. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
so talk about what that's like. I mean, you're in the throes of family leave with the new baby, but at the same time, I also know you. Here you are doing this podcast, and you're still doing a little bit of work. What does that feel
Yeah.
like to be trying to like have one foot in paternity leave and one foot in CEOing? Is that a verb?
Uh,
CEOing?
sure. Yeah. I'm gonna probably say many words that are not words today, but uh, it's hard. Yeah. But like, cannabis certainly doesn't stop, especially this year. And so right now is an incredibly difficult time for me to step away. Not to say that my team doesn't have everything handled at the office. It's just more that things move at light speed, and it's really hard for me to like let go of that. However, I have just this immense amount of appreciation for the whole concept of paternity or maternity leave, because the context switching when you're on just massive sleep deprivation is really challenging. So, funny story. I won't name names, but if they're listening, they'll absolutely know that I'm talking about the meeting we just had. Uh, so, you know, my schedule's all messed up. I don't know when I'm going to bed. I don't know when I'm waking up. I have two older kids that I try to get to camp at some point in the day, but I'm like, okay, I can do an early morning meeting. So I put a meeting on the calendar for like 7 a.m. And last night I'm like getting ready for bed. I'm like, what time do I have to wake up to look presentable for this meeting? So set my alarm for 6:20. And we had a night where the baby was just having a rough go of it. And finally my alarm went off at like 6:20. I was in no mood to get up, and I'm like, why is my alarm going off? I don't have to get the kids to camp until like 8 a.m. And And
Fully forgot.
I reset my alarm for 7 and then when it goes off, there's not only alarm going off, but a calendar item like, on the home screen being like, oh, 7 a.m. with said partner. And I was
Very
like,
important person.
let's just say I was on that call by 7:02, which is well within my realm of flexibility of like 3 minutes. um,
Amazing. Did you have pants on in the meeting?
some sort of pants. That's a very valid question. But yeah, that was my morning, and it was just like not only that aspect, the logistics of like being in two different like worlds at the same time, but just like that brain fog, the switching from like just keeping a baby alive to like actually thinking about business is a tough switch. So
Yeah.
if you can, if you're a business leader and you don't have kids, but you're being asked about paternity or maternity leave, like just know that it's hyper valuable to those that are going through it.
It's like going through it yourself is the very best way to teach you empathy for others that are.
Yeah. Yeah. But, to your point, CEOing, it's hard to turn off. And what I really do appreciate about this time is that it's given me a time to like step out of the day to day and really think about the higher level things. And so, I've been thinking a lot about visioning. We have our annual team offsite in August. And so like giving me this time leading up to that to really think about the big picture, what this year means for everything, because every year in cannabis kind of either slightly or dramatically changes what the future looks like for you. Um, but also, I like to do, a lot of outreach and understanding to kind of help paint that picture for myself. So I send a questionnaire out to my team, which is some prying questions, and really ask for just radical transparency, ownership, like basically no holds barred. No reaction coming from me, just like tell me what I need to hear. And I do that with our clients as well. So I'll send out questions to our customers and just get a full, basically 360 of how we're showing up as a company, how we're showing up as a leadership team, and using that for guiding us as we go into your favorite part of the business season. It's like establishing the strategic plan, the operating plan, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I'm so curious about the customers and their willingness to even be responsive. What do you
hmm
find when you reach out to customers and ask them to participate in a process like this? Do you get 100% response? Do you get 20% response? What does that look like?
I think 20% is probably the right number, 20 to 30%. If I were to go back and look at my inbox, what I do recognize is that I'm incredibly flattered and appreciative of how much thought and time people actually spend, put into it. People that I would not expect, right? And sometimes it's new relationships, sometimes it's long relationships. Um, you know, get a lot of flattering commentary, but also like some really helpful critical feedback. And I try to ask things in ways of like, okay, maybe they don't have a direct criticism now, but like, what's something that you might see in the future that we should avoid, right? And it's just really helpful to first know what people appreciate about us. Like what's, what's the value we're creating and how does that compare to what we think we're doing for them, right? It's like you have your value proposition that you think you're out there selling, but maybe it's something completely different. And these types of opportunities like really kind of highlight how you're showing up for your customers. And then if you ask the right questions, you can understand what their anxieties are about the future. And again, in cannabis and hemp right now, like there's probably a lot of that. And so it's like asking like, who do you think we need to be for you next year? Not just right now. And so I really try to use that to make sure it's like, everything that we're building towards, everything that we're investing in, like, is it actually aiming to create the most amount of value possible, not only for our customers, but also for our employees.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, what you're talking about is design thinking. It's centering on the customer and truly learning about them and then iterating around them and layering in the employee piece. And I want to talk about that too, but I'm not done talking about the customers because I think it's so interesting and such an important lesson for cannabis leaders out there because I think that within the onslaught of regulatory compliance and the lack of marketing and things, that there's very few cannabis companies that I have worked with that I've seen implement this type of customer feedback loop. And so I
Mm.
think it's really powerful and worth talking about. So as I want to ask a couple more questions about it.
Sure.
So you said that you're getting feedback from folks. You've been really public that Vertosa's business is both in regulated cannabis and in hemp. So a lot of the
Hmm.
customers that you're talking with right now are probably faced with an incredible amount of stress and uncertainty or shifts in their own business. And are they giving you good ideas about ways to adjust and shift your business in a way that's kind of proving that this process is useful for your own strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's helpful for reinforcing, questions I've asked myself about like how loud or how visible do I need to be? I mean, obviously I'm on here every week, but that's different than me showing up on LinkedIn and writing articles and doing all that kind of stuff that I have done in the past, but notably have been a little bit quieter this year just because it felt like so much is out there in the ether.
Mhm.
But one thing that just keeps coming back is like, Vertosa talks to a lot of people across the supply chains, is very involved in the politics, all this kind of stuff. It's like people want to hear what we're seeing and hearing in the marketplace, and they want it on the regular. So almost is like our opportunity to be kind of like a strategic advisor to folks, which is very different than just selling, reliable ingredients, right? And so, really thinking about how do we take the visibility that we have and make sure that we're persistently putting it in front of people and probably accelerating it right now because there is so much uncertainty. So it's like the more stability there is, maybe you're thinking more about like, just consumer insights and what the trends are. But like right now it is actually what is like the current events that are affecting people's businesses. And I shouldn't assume that they're getting that information elsewhere, right? Um,
Yeah, the
yeah.
onslaught of emails are not always the ones that people click on just because 'cause they're there. Doesn't
Right.
mean that they're reading them, and you want a trusted source, and if it sounds like what they're saying is that they trust you as a deliverer of the message. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I think there's so many times where I'm like, it's like people don't need another article from Ben. They don't need another lengthy LinkedIn musing, right? Um, and maybe they don't, but our customers, our partners do need just more like what the boots on the ground are hearing and seeing as far as where everything's heading.
Yeah. Well, so then let's talk about what the employees are saying. So you reach out to your customers, you talk to them,
Hmm.
and then what are you asking your employees?
Yeah. So I ask a lot of prying questions. Like the first one I know that's on the form is like, what's something I need to hear that I'm probably not hearing, and so it's just like something that's very open ended, very thought provoking. Other ones are like, what are we currently doing that we probably shouldn't be doing anymore, or that you might question why we're doing it. Um, and I ask probably like 7 or 8 of these types of questions, and then because it's a Google form, it comes back in this giant matrix. And right now it's a matrix. I haven't actually like dug through a whole lot of it. I've kind of like just kind of spot checked here and there. Um, the beauty of some of the tools available to us these days is like I could read through it all. I could drop it in ChatGPT or Claude and have it like be like, what are your key takeaways? What are the whispers? Like what are people not saying directly, but that are, resonating across messaging or tone? So I'm really excited to kind of like leverage some of these not new tools, but tools that are becoming part of our daily life. Um, and what I'm recognizing actually now is like we've had a history, and not to brag, but like we've had a history of just really positive like reviews and all these opportunities for people to give feedback were often like just ideas of inspiration. Um, and I can already tell this year, and likely driven by a lot of the uncertainty and the quick shifts we've had to make in the business because of the shifting regulations, is just needing a lot more communications, especially about the vision and how it connects to the daily actions, like that we need to be communicating as leaders. And so, um, you know, I'm saying all this not just because I feel like opening the book on what's happening at Vertosa, but because I think it is actually very important for every business leader in cannabis right now to be thinking about, like, how are you leading your teams through all of this uncertainty, and what are the levels of transparency and communication you're having with them, because that is kind of already what I'm recognizing as the key takeaway.
Yeah. I think that as we assess culture and think about how to lead culture and also execution and all the other things that we're trying to do in a company, uh, especially in cannabis, there is this level of instability that cannabis employees have been living with for years. It's like if you've been working in cannabis, you have just never felt stable in your job
Mm,
because who knows what might happen or what might get shut down. And even in legal cannabis regulated states, like the companies have been through so much financial up and down that there has not only been not an investment in culture and employee benefit programs and things like that are on par with other industries, but I think sometimes the leaders think that they're shouldering all of the uncertainty and the stress themselves, but the employees feel it.
mm,
They do, and it gets in the way of people being able to get shit done and to stay on task because they're worried about if they need to be worried about how they're gonna be paying rent or if they can go home for Christmas because of how expensive plane tickets are or whatever, and so it makes sense that in a year like we've had that even after many years of your employee happiness being incredibly high, that you might be seeing some new questions that could speak to an undertone of some fear related to how stable is my job? How
mhm.
stable is this industry? Because it's stuff that feels very out of control of frontline staff.
Yeah, and I feel, because our company's 8 years old at this point, and we've been through a number of these kind of cycles and waves, and, you know, we leaders, I do think, naturally seek to kind of shoulder a lot of that, or at least be a buffer to that uncertainty, and create the buffer of, create some stability amongst the uncertainty. But at a certain point, the unknown, like, always, like, gnaws at people. And, um yeah, I think right now I just been thinking about a lot of that. We have an incredible team that we've curated over all those years, all the ups and downs, like, we always come out stronger, with an even, like, larger, more stable core. And, I think we're at a point with our trajectory where it's like, and maybe it's not just our trajectory, maybe it's just everyone needs to start really thinking about, like, how do you just give more ownership, and realize that we're all adults, and that, like, people have the ability to shoulder that stress with you. And so, um, like, this, we talked about it, like, I'm having our leadership team read this book right now called Turn the Ship Around. And it's it's like it's based on, like, true stories about, like, warfare, and, like, how you take leadership from, your lower ranks, and let them kind of, like, really lead the way. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the concept that the book talks about, just in quick summary, is this idea of leader follower versus leader leader, and this idea that that you can turn your staff into leaders, move from a leader follower model to a leader leader model, but that it actually takes a lot from the first leader at the top to kind of change the culture so that people can lead on their own and feel empowered to do so, which I think is really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and, like, I I have to give credit to a particular person, you know, on our team last fall, like, pointed out to me, was just like, "Ben, like, too many people look to you for the answer, um, in too many, like, conversations." And I'm like, "I don't want that." Like, how do I, like, how do I remove that desire for people to have, like, my buy-in, right? Um, and I don't know if I have all the answers, but it has had to have been a deliberate process over the last 7 months, to kind of try to remove that kind of impulse of, like, "Oh, well, let's get Ben's approval, or let's get Ben's, buy-in before we act."
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that it plays into the whole not just trust, but clear strategic alignment and also communicated boundaries. I think
Mm.
that it's really common for, especially in smaller companies, for the CEO or for certain leaders to be these bottlenecks. But part of that also has to do with there hasn't been systems that create ability to empower folks.
Mhm.
Especially I see it often as it relates, and I don't know if this is a problem at your company or not, but related to budgets and financial engineering. Of when a company has an actual budget that they can manage against, then there's ability to empower leaders throughout an organization to act on things.
Mm.
And that when companies have, because they can release the resources that are needed based on predetermined and agreed upon constraints that are resource related. But when companies don't have a budget and you're in constant state of financial distress, it creates this endless cycle of needing to put everything through, like, kind of micromanage minute approvals over and over.
Man, you just yeah, you just, punched me on the chin right there, because I was thinking about these little points in time, probably multiple, and they all probably coincide with these recessionary cycles of, like, me being like, "I don't know, we're just on zero-based budgeting right now." And that's just had to be the case in cannabis for a lot of folks for so long. You know, it's just you're in crisis mode, and it's like you only spend if you absolutely have to, and so at a certain point, people are just like, "Can I?" Um,
Yeah.
yes. So moving away from that
Yeah,
is
totally.
yeah.
And I get why it's hard. I have a client that runs their books on a cash basis instead of an accrual basis, and I've never seen a company of their size run books on a cash basis as opposed to accrual. And yet I totally understand why they've made that choice.
Mm,
And it's very much a reality of the cannabis world that they are operating in, and it makes more sense for them because there isn't a 500,000, $2 million credit line to be able to get in front of bills in a different way. Like, they don't have access to the same amount of capital that they would. And so they're basically trying to make sure that they are running their books based on the money that they have in front of them. But
right.
it's just it's
Whi
it's
which is oddly responsible.
oddly irresponsible and makes a ton of sense. It's just kind of break the traditional finance and accounting rules.
Mhm.
So, good stuff. This is some big adult CEO stuff that you're talking about. So I'm hoping that people are inspired by this because it is. We are moving towards planning season, and this feedback loop of getting out of our own heads as leaders and looking back at the people that we serve, our employees and our customers, and understanding what they want, need, and see is such a powerful lever to create clarity and an understanding about what the next phase and year should look like.
Yeah, my last piece of advice, if you're gonna go do this, like, just make sure you have that step in your process of like setting aside your ego and being completely open to whatever it is that you receive back. And knowing that it's a gift, right? The critical feedback is a gift to help you, your team, and your company be better. That's it.
Mic drop there. Set aside your ego. No big deal, right, guys? Just
No big deal.
put it aside. No ego.
Smoke some weed.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got kind of two-ish newsy topics that we're going to dive into and talk through with everybody today, which I think are important signals for the industry. Um, the first one is another acquisition announcement from Vireo Growth came out via press release yesterday. And Vireo Growth has announced that they are picking up cultivation, production, and mostly retail operations from the Cannabis Company, formerly known as Columbia Care, across the states of Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and West Virginia, in a deal that is priced as up to $35 million. They are putting in a little under $19 million of cash at closing, with another 16-ish million in seller's notes. The transaction adds 25 dispensaries to the portfolio and then one cultivation and one production asset, which I think is interesting because it really is very retail heavy as opposed to production. And probably that's because Vireo already has production and cultivation in some of these states. And this will push Vireo's footprint to roughly 230 dispensaries across 15 states, making it the second largest dispensary network in the country, second to Trulieve. But Trulieve notably is so heavily focused and concentrated in Florida that this footprint that Vireo now owns is very substantial. And yeah, I think that another thing that's useful to think about and to understand about this is that this is absolutely a distressed asset sale, not a merger of equals or even just like a clean and regular acquisition. The cannabis commenced restructuring proceedings in Canadian court back in March of this year. And part of that was a strategic review that landed on the need to offload these specific market assets. And it's also interesting because the cannabist has been trying to participate in different types of M&A deals for a while. They tried to merge with Cresco back in 2022, and that deal fell apart. But before it did, we got to see that Puff Daddy was interested in being a strategic investor into that deal. If Cresco and Cannabist were going to come together in a couple markets, there was going to need to be some divestiture of some assets, and Puff Daddy was going to be the acquirer of them before his legal troubles took over all the headlines.
Slip through the fingers.
Yeah, the Cresco and cannabis merger did collapse under market pressure and regulatory pressure, uh, but it looks like some of the cannabis assets are finally finding a home with Vireo. So,
Hmm.
um, Vireo is on a massive acquisition just roll up sprint. They have in the last 18 months just completely shifted what the company was compared to what it is today, um, especially in Colorado. They have made a number of Colorado acquisitions, Schwazi, PharmaCann, Ease, Green Dragon, and now some of these cannabis assets. And so they've got over 50 dispensaries in the state of Colorado also, which is interesting considering that Colorado has been such a brutal market for operators for some time. So they must think that they have an opportunity to really turn around these distressed businesses in the state by achieving scale of some kind.
Yeah, it's an interesting play. When you're talking about it, I immediately be like, "Why Colorado?" Um, but I'm trying to string together a bunch of the conversations that we've had over the last several weeks, and Colorado is interesting in the fact that we've done a lot of research into Colorado, and they have a very engaged regulatory body and legislature. So when you're talking about cannabis and hemp issues, like you're actually talking it's collaborative in ways, right? Um, and you, it, there seems to be a certain level of sophistication in that regulatory body and legislature around, when you're talking about these bigger issues, maybe interstate commerce and all these things, that maybe Colorado does eventually end up being a strong hub. I don't know what that means or how like a whole network of dispensaries helps you in this particular case, but from my lens, like it can make Colorado an interesting place. I You look at these types of companies a lot more frequently than I do. I look at a scoop up of a bunch of distressed assets in the kind of dispensary layer. I'm like, how does that not just maintain as a distressed, like, you know, a distressed asset? Like, how do you actually make that better and make it more efficient? Because I it's not immediately obvious to me.
Yeah, it's such a great question and a great point because we talk about distressed assets, and I think people have an assumption that if an asset is distressed, that means that it isn't profitable as a standalone business. And I don't know the individual financials of each of these 25 doors that uh, were the cannabis and now belong to Vireo, but thinking that a distressed asset means that the business isn't profitable is not necessarily correct.
Mm,
Usually the reason that an asset becomes distressed has to do with something that is more complicated than that, related to debt. And so maybe the business got into an early debt relationship that had certain covenants or payments that were going to be due, or that were at a super high rate, and that rate and the debt is not sustainable. And that when you layer in the debt with the existing operations of the business, it doesn't work. But if you're able to take away the debt, that the business on a standalone basis can be healthy.
mm,
And so I think that's a big part of what Vireo is so good at, is about restructuring debt. And with the CEO coming from Chicago Atlantic, which is the largest debt provider in cannabis, they certainly understand the way debt works and the triggers and the levers that debt creates for these companies. So that's what I know that they're looking at, is that when you
mhm.
take the debt off the table, what does the company look like? And so I think that's one thing to understand when you think about distressed assets. But then it is possible that distressed assets also are bad businesses as standalone once you scrape away the debt. That happens too. And I think that is um, more of a philosophy and approach, that these companies are thinking that with scale, they can um, eliminate costs, potentially being more efficient, or that they have something else that's unique and magical, that's going to be a way that they can win the consumer in some different way. Maybe they have a different brand strategy, or a pricing strategy, or an integrated marketing approach, that they have a strength in their own ideology, that they're going to be able to grow the business beyond where it is today. Um, so
Makes sense.
that would be my take on this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
This is probably a lot of the stuff I would have learned had I gone to business school or something like that.
I mean, I will tell you that I didn't learn this stuff in business school. I very much learned it just by doing, of understanding how to get through diligence of a deal, and what are we looking for, and
Mm,
even just understanding, well, why the hell do people keep talking about EBITDA? And, EBITDA, like, strips away the debt, strips
mm,
away taxes, it strips away these things that make it so that you can see the business in a way that some people will argue is pointless, because obviously the debt and the taxes do matter. If you're a business, you still need to make those debt payments. But if you're someone that's thinking about, well, what might it look like without debt, then that number starts to become more interesting.
gotcha.
As it relates to Colorado, I just pulled up some data. It looks like so Colorado is the 12th largest of the US cannabis states by reported sales. It did 1.2 billion in 2025 of cannabis retail, but that is down 9% year over year. So
Mm,
to think that it's been tough in Colorado, the data certainly supports it. It's a real market. It's over $1 billion, but it's been shrinking. Um, there's over 600 dispensaries in the state, and there's over 30,000 people that are working full-time jobs in the state in the cannabis industry. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we'll see what Vireo is able to do at this point. The acquisition train has been moving so fast that we
yeah.
haven't really had any longevity to see, like, well, what does a consolidated balance sheet look like for the Colorado companies, and how have they been able to create value? Um, but we'll be watching.
Yeah. I remember you coming back from Ignite at Chicago and just being like, the only thing anyone's really talking about is consolidation, in light of the Schedule 3 movement. So there you go.
Well, okay, and so now we're Schedule 3 and the DEA is gonna be our next topic, but you had said, why a bunch of retail stores, and that you think Colorado is interesting. And
Mhm.
I did think, "Huh, I wonder if a company like Vireo is starting to think that retail is more valuable than production in states with high production costs, because maybe interstate commerce is something that they're thinking might happen sooner rather than later." I
Mm.
posted a very lively thread
I
on
saw that.
about interstate commerce. And
Is that what they call going viral?
I don't know, but yes, lots. I knew when I did it, I was trying to bring people into the conversation, and yeah, it was a post about a prediction that I have that the fight between those that are for interstate commerce versus those that are trying to protect the existing state borders is going to get more heated and more lively than even the regulated cannabis versus hemp debate that we've been in for the past 24 months or so.
Okay, so we share a similar lens on that. I feel like that's an obvious statement, but were there people that were pushing back on this?
I don't think anyone was pushing back on the debate. I'd say that
Hmm.
there are some,
They're choosing sides.
yes, people are kind of choosing sides, or people have various levels of belief in the ability for it to actually happen. And there has been, and even you brought up Ignite It when I was at the conference in Chicago. I saw MSO executives on stage say that good luck if anyone thinks that interstate commerce is going to happen. And then you've got a whole bunch of other people that are like, well, of course interstate commerce is happening.
Hubris is
And
a bitch.
so, I think that what becomes really interesting about this, and shout out to Dave Daly from Grav, who we've had here on the show before. He lives in Texas. Grav is a company that's involved in states all over the place as a glass company, and they also do make cannabis products. But he pointed out, he said, maybe the MSOs are going to feel different about interstate commerce because they just got licenses in Texas and they're not going to want to build out cultivation assets in Texas. And I think that these are the type of signals that end up being these levers for
Mm,
the way that the markets might mature. Is that whereas, I don't know, maybe Trulieve might decide that they want to put up an argument to protect their state borders in Florida, but now faced with the opportunity in Texas and the need to build a scaled cultivation asset in Texas that easily could cost 20 to 50 million dollars to reach the level of scale that they would need in a market like Texas. Maybe they become more open to the idea of working on creating some sort of interstate pack or a
mm.
pipeline from one of their existing assets into Texas. So I think how these things end up playing out might surprise us.
I also suspect that we might see people follow like Oregon's lead, what they did with hemp, and create these kind of clearinghouse licenses where it's like, oh yeah, you can import it, but it has to go through a licensed producer like in that state. And yeah, it kind of gums up the system a little bit and creates some protection. But um, yeah, I think it's kind of like water. It's just gonna find its way where it wants to go. Like capitalism in general.
I think that's true. Uh, well, so as it relates to Schedule 3, I thought it would be useful to talk about a key element of what the DEA's Schedule 3 hearings over the past couple weeks have focused on, and
Mm.
that is the 5-part test and the 2-part test. Uh, you with me? You know what I'm talking about? Kind of.
I'm
So,
gonna nod my head yes and let 'em know. I don't think so.
so so basically, the whole DEA Schedule 3 hearings were about, does cannabis have a currently accepted medical use? They've been The acronym is CAMU, CAMU. And there has been this traditional standard by which the DEA made an assessment on um, a currently accepted medical use, and it was called the 5-part test. And it requires known reproducible chemistry, safety studies, expert acceptance. Known reproducible chemistry, though, has been the killer because it is
Mm,
built around a single synthesizable molecule. And um, cannabis, a plant with dozens of active compounds, can't satisfy the 5-part test. It just can't get through the way that the chemistry is analyzed. And so, the single molecule versus whole plant problem, in a nutshell, is the core of why the DEA and the DOJ created this new part test, which they call the 2-part test. And it is a different way that they can assess the currently accepted medical use question. And under the two-part test, cannabis was able to validate, or HHS and the DEA believe that that cannabis was able to validate itself as having a currently accepted medical use. And so the whole DEA hearing ended up being this fight about the opposition claiming that the two-part test isn't valid and that the five-part test is a better assessment of currently accepted medical use. Uh, and people from the FDA even accepting or admitting that cannabis would not have passed the old five-part test. So it's interesting because it feels like it's this fight about trying to hold on to a process that was clearly outdated and didn't work versus a process that created a pathway for cannabis. And it's going to be in some ways up to the judge to decide if the opposition made a strong enough argument that the two-part test is illegitimate and that this old five-part test about single molecules is a better way to judge medical use.
This is where my brain just starts to break because I'm like, for so long, we're like, yeah, we should be talking about the individual molecules because they all have different effects and CBD should be treated differently than THC. But then we have the Controlled Substances Act that just calls it all one plant, and therefore it's Schedule 1 or Schedule 3, which is where like ketamine and all these other like molecules live. And so it's like the federal, the divide within the federal government is what is creating this consternation. And like, I don't know. I think it would be an evolved conversation if we could get to the point where we're actually talking about the individual compounds because there's so much interesting stuff happening inside the plant.
Yeah. And this like full spectrum experience that anecdotally and through lots of research is one of the things that makes cannabis so powerful. Uh is not just about single molecules though. It really is
True.
about the whole
But
plant.
but we could probably find medical applications for every cannabinoid that's available. Be like, here's what you use THC for. Here's what you use CBD for. CBG, CBN, CBC, CBL. Like it's
Yes. And what has gone through the FDA are two examples of single molecule drug approvals, and that is Epidiolex and
Marinol
Sativa? Marinol,
or
Marinol.
yeah.
Um, and that's yeah, CBD as a single compound or THC as a it's not single compound, molecule, excuse
Mm-hmm.
me. That's
Mm-hmm.
the whole point. Compound versus molecule. So I think that this is going to be really impactful to see if the government goes back on its assessment of deciding to go forward with this two-part test. I think that if the two-part test wins, the path to Schedule 3 is straightforward. But if the five-part test is determined to actually be a better standard bearer for determining medical use, the path to Schedule 3 is less straightforward. And it seems like all the noise around what happens next is going to be focused on this test. So it seems important for all of you out there who are listening to start thinking about what this test is and the implications of it. Ultimately, to the access and the opportunities that the industry is facing on the other side of Schedule 3 and these ALJ hearings.
And sorry, for the sake of clarity, this is cannabis inclusive of adult use?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, I know it's a head trip and it's a bit of a tangle. Um, but it is very much what we are up against at the moment. And I think that the other element within all of this, if we now take ourselves out of the Schedule 3 hearings, um, and we start thinking about the FDA, and if we get over the hump and the two-part test holds, cannabis is ruled to be in Schedule 3 broadly, not just medical, but as the plant, Schedule 3. Uh, we kind of need to talk about the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. That matters too.
Oh man, yeah.
Often called the FD&CA, and it governs whether a product can legally be marketed as a food or drug in the first place. And this is something that's enforced by the FDA.
Hmm.
whereas the Controlled Substances Act, which is what we're debating for Schedule 3, is enforced and overseen by the DEA. So these are two different federal agencies that both have a big part to play in the future of opportunity in the cannabis industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a number of these conversations over the last couple of years. I think it started at Canra 2 years ago in Minneapolis, and talking with Norm Birnbaum about what would need to be done. And the FDCA or FDNCA was like a critical piece. And right now there's food, there's drugs, uh, supplements, cosmetics, all this kind of stuff, and there are all these distinct categories. And I think in cannabis we talk a lot about, it's like, oh, cannabis needs to be treated like a supplement, or it's also used in food. And um, what needs to happen is that there needs to be a cannabinoid section, and this needs just to be holistically written with all these considerations, um, because we're never going to choose one by which it kind of like fits the mold. And I think we've seen some effort in that, in some of the language that's been drafted over the last couple of years. Obviously, nothing's really gained traction. Um, but yeah, this is the next big step. And if we can get our own section in the FDCNA, then we can, or FDNCA, then we can, uh, basically deliberate over how cannabinoids show up in all these various supply chains or marketplaces.
Yeah, and this call out that the FDA has never approved a botanical cannabis or cannabis derived product um, is not because it's impossible. It's just it hasn't happened. And what you're talking about is the path to doing it and the path to getting away from these single molecule medicines being the only FDA approved cannabinoid treatments.
Hmm.
So um, if cannabis is rescheduled, it's not the same thing as FDA approved, but it does open the door for a lot of the research that has made it harder, I think, to become FDA approved to take place. But even to say that research isn't happening in cannabis because of the scheduling is very glib in that there is a lot of cannabis research that's going on all the time and has been for many years. So we probably have what we need. I don't know.
Yeah, I think regardless, it's always going to be a lot more work than everyone realizes, because I mean the biggest example of all this is just CBD, right? Like CBD became legal, so to speak, or off the Controlled Substances Act. Um, and I mean true CBD, like nothing kind of trying to be baked into there. And you had, brands like Recess and Day Trip and Vibes and stuff like that on the marketplace. And in talking to those brands, they never got like wide scale distribution. And you can say whatever you want about like product market fit and like it being a category and all that kind of stuff, but regardless, it was never easy to open doors because the FDA never actually weighed in on CBD. And it's like, if we got rescheduling, like we would still need to be told by the FDA about where these products are allowed to be consumed.
Yeah. It is wild to see how there are still, though, maybe not widespread distribution, but there are still some major companies that are selling CBD products in the supplement area of the stores. I think like Whole Foods often
Yeah,
has.
major, like what their top line revenues, 20 to 30 million
I mean,
dollars at
at
most.
Whole Foods, you can buy CBD products, and they're owned by Amazon. S I think that that's, like, one of the biggest companies out there, and,
Yeah.
but they present some liabilities for the companies that are selling them potentially, but it's mostly just because the FDA, it seems like, has just chosen to deprioritize, focusing on whether it's enforcement and or regulation of these
Hmm.
products. So,
Yeah.
big questions out there, who knows? But, um, fun stuff either way, it all matters. If you're in cannabis, all of the regulatory agencies somehow become a part of your dinner table conversation, so, well, welcome to that.
Yeah. Yeah. My my dinner table conversations are always so are things going okay for you?
I know
Uh,
my husband doesn't want to hear about it anymore.
I know,
Like
I know.
it's like too nuanced. He's like, I don't understand
Yeah.
what.
It's like, yeah, we're alive. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what we've got for today. I don't have anything else.
No, I just thank you for giving me some sort of normalcy back in my life. I do feel like I'm trying to reemerge from my cocoon, and yeah, it is helpful to kind of like have this hit this touch point with you and with everyone else. So thank you.
Yeah, the world appreciates you, Ben, and we want to get you back. Even we want to take you out of the baby bubble when you're ready.
Half the man I used to be.
When I was at the state fair, I again talked to people that listen to us regularly, and so appreciative when people come up and talk to us about the content we're making and tell us that you're listening. It really means a lot. And I had the chance to ask some people actually specifically, like, well, how do you feel about when it's just me and Ben versus when we have a guest on? And
Yeah.
they like us and that they like to listen to us and that we don't always need a guest. So
Well,
if they're telling me the truth, hopefully they
maybe
found.
we need to employ my customer survey.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Folks, let us know what you think. Maybe we will be giving you a survey with a link at some point.
Absolutely. Until then, thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to our teams at Vertos and Wolfmeyer for continually supporting us. And of course, our producer, Eric Rossetti. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share, like, review, do all the things. We're on YouTube. Our followers are growing on YouTube. Just thank you for listening, wherever that is. As always, folks, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, keep your spirits high. Until next time, that's the show.